You want an investment edge, but all you hear is noise, hype, and half-truths. Every signal is solid information, but only if you can see the bigger picture. This is where the quasar magic happens. Weather, charts, news, all financial signals funneled into a single dashboard. Data alone isn't enough. Quasar Markets turns it into energy, sharp, clear, precise. Optimize with Quasar Markets today. Your edge when investing.
Good morning, Quasar Markets Live. It's Monday, August 25th. After an 846-point rally Friday that sent the Dow to record highs, futures are pulling back a bit this morning as we digest Powell's dovish tilt. We've got some whale-driven crypto volatility on tap and a flood of earnings this week, headlined by a small little company named NVIDIA. I am solo to start this off. We will have BigBeat coming in pretty soon. We might get a little drop in by our man Scott Bauer, and we have Steve Flanagan later. Hello, Ari. How are you? Hope you're having a great start to your trading day. So, a lot going on. You got to start with Powell, right? We were in the room yesterday or Friday, Friday when, Powell spoke. He signaled that rate cuts may be warranted due to the labor weakness. We now do see, that's sort of starting to get digested. And, we are seeing about an 87% odds of a September 25 basis point cut. So that is fueling the markets, or did fuel the markets tremendously on Friday. We will see what we get here at the open. As a precursor, if crypto is any sort of indicator, look for some taking of the profit here today. And I will say, when we're looking for the gainers and laggards on the day, not a ton of gainers. And most of those gainers, quite honestly, are the Chinese ADR companies. So we'll get into that a little bit later. 10-year yield, it has stabilized right around 4.27. And the DXY has picked back up and looks to be trying to challenge that $98 mark again. As I mentioned, Friday's rally, the Dow was up about 846, NASDAQ up 396, S&P was up 96 points. Crypto Bitcoin went all the way up to about 117.5. Ethereum challenged 4,800 again. But like I said, we have seen a pretty big pullback across those. Question is, and I have it for you folks here, can this risk rally hold through the September-October seasonality? Can we hold what we just picked up is the question I have for all of you, our viewers. Please do me a favor to go ahead and hit the follow button, like button, all those fun things. Share the stream. It helps us out here at Quasar Markets get to more, viewers and more retail traders. This week, we do have a little data on hand. We do have the PCE inflation data on Friday. We do have Fed talk starting today, and it will keep on going. But overall, again, the Fed put was in play, right? The Fed put says that when times get tough, the Fed will come out and say something or do something that will buoy the markets. And that is what happened on Friday. Let's start to talk a little bit about what's going on corporate moves here. And I'm going to switch over to our winners and losers here in the pre-market. First one we're going to talk about here is Intel here. And again, Intel, the bigger news there is the fact that they have confirmed, and the White House has confirmed that they the 10% stake is going to go through. They won't receive a board seat, but they will be the largest investor. Shares are up on this news. Man, you got to wonder, is this just the start? They had Secretary Hassett on, and he said it is just the start, that the government will start asking for equity stakes in other chip makers as repayment for prior CHIP Act grants and subsidies. Man, how much things have changed in the Republican Party. I believe it was Ronald Reagan who said the worst thing that can happen is when the federal, government shows up at your door and says, we're here to help, right? So what a change that has really been. But, the market seems to like it so far. Again, the shares are up, about 7% since that news hit. We'll see if it's sustainable. If it's good for the company or not. It's not something unheard of in other countries across the world, especially in Europe. We've seen a lot of cases where, for fact, we used to complain about it with Airbus getting, maybe some unfair subsidies from the French government, and there's been other cases of that. I'm not a big fan of it myself. I will be very interested. And, BigBeat and I talked about it briefly on Friday. He wasn't a fan. I want to see if his mood has changed on that at all, or is he still feeling that way? Another one, KDP, a little bit of drinks in the news today, which is Dr. Pepper Keurig. They have an $18 billion deal in place to get further into coffee. They are going to buy Peet's for $18 billion. It's about a 20% over the current price of Peet's, which is a Danish company, just so you know. And then they are going to split into two companies. They are going to put the coffee company on its own two legs, and it's going to operate as the world's largest coffee company, quite honestly. I have a question. Is there enough caffeine in this deal to really jolt Keurig's struggling coffee segment? Or is this just more corporate reshuffling? So, we've seen this. We've seen the breakups. We've seen Paramount, right? Skydance. We've seen what's happening there. There is a lot of M&A, and then there's a lot of reverse M&A sort of going on. So it's a tale of two stories here. Peet's has been looking for an answer, and Keurig, since Dr. Pepper picked it up, has probably been what you would call a laggard for them. So far, market doesn't like the news. The shares of Keurig are down about 7.5%. Latest target on the president's tariff list seems to be furniture, couches. So Robinhood, Restoration Hardware, Wayfair, and Williams-Sonoma are all sliding this morning. Some of the laggards out there in response to these tariffs. It does actually have Ethan Allen, or it did have them up. I do want to double check that as things have been moving. Yeah, they're still up about 4. They were up 6%, so they have pulled back slightly. They don't have a ton of volume, although they already have in the pre-market, their trading volume has already exceeded their normal daily trading volume. So this one is going to see a little bit of love. Good morning, Marilyn. How are you? Hope all is well. So again, and then Restoration Hardware, all those companies that do import their furniture getting hit pretty hard, down about 8.12%. Wayfair down about 8.34%. So getting hit pretty hard here on this tariff news. You know, my question is that these tariffs seem laser focused on couches right now. Do we see this as a targeted play to bring furniture manufacturing back to the U.S., or is this just more political posturing that pressures retailers? You know, that's the question we got to worry about, or we got to wonder here today for sure. Another one getting hit pretty hard this morning is Orsted. Should be on my list. Where'd it go? Down about 15% here. This is after the U.S. has halted their Rhode Island wind project that was 80% done. They raised capital concerns. Wind projects are now under attack just after about a week after Trump did a complete 180 on solar and got that sector moving. So again, is this a true structural headwind for renewables or just another bump in the policy road is the question you have to start to ask here. Hey, Zora, how are you doing? Hey, Faustina. Welcome, welcome. And again, you know, that is a huge windmill project being done off the coast of Rhode Island. And as I said, the administration made a 180 here on solar. So they do something similar here when it comes to wind renewables. I will say, if you look at the pre-market movers today, most of them, although now PDD is completely flipped, have been what we call Chinese ADR companies. These are the U.S. stock exchange traded versions of Chinese-based companies. PDD, as you can see, was up tremendously, trading at 151, now down at 124. So that didn't last very long. They were up 11% on stronger earnings. They came in at 3.08 EPS versus a $2.16 estimate. And you did have, and you still do right now, NTES, another Chinese ADR, which is NetEase, Tiger, TIGR, another one, Baidu. All of these are Chinese JD, Chinese companies. All of them were some of the biggest leaders this morning out of the gates in the pre-market. A lot of them getting hit here this morning now. But they were 90% of the sort of those early morning gainers were out of China. Some of them are giving up some of those gains here this morning. But, personally for me, I'm a seller of these whenever they pump up because they don't seem to have sustainability, first of all. Second of all, it's kind of hard to trust the numbers when it comes to them. A lot of times I have issues there. And we've seen, again, when, a lot of times they'll pump up on government stimulus or government programs coming out of China, and those don't ever tend to really get out of the startup phases. So that's what we tend to see. Those are most of the biggest movers so far today. Okta is a nice one going into earnings tomorrow, up about 3.37%. So it does look like people believe that they maybe are poised for good earnings coming up here over the week, but they are one of the few early morning gainers, like I said, that wasn't based on being a Chinese ADR. Over the weekend, as I mentioned, crypto has pulled back pretty hard. Had broken as high as 112, about 600, 650, 117, excuse me, there, and has fallen 3 straight days since, challenged and got down all the way to my target at that 110, 650 here that I said was the downside key support level to watch. It's challenging it again here right now. And, over the weekend, a huge whale liquidated 24,000 Bitcoin in a quick amount of time, selling into this pressure. Selling into this, the big pump up. And I will say there are rumors, although at this point, unsubstantiated rumors, that whale still has a lot more Bitcoin. The wallet that was used, that wallet is emptied. So that, I don't know if it's just some talk on Twitter. None of the big data aggregators in the crypto world, Glassnode, Masari, or any of the others have come out with any connection to those other wallets that are being pointed at. And we do see for the first time since early May, Ethereum under pressure. The Ethereum ETFs had outflows, their first outflows since May, 237 million worth. And again, Bitcoin ETFs last week actually saw $1 billion in outflows. So retail definitely is leaving the game a little bit here, as that's the case. And what we're also seeing is crypto equities definitely under pressure today. MicroStrategy down about 3.7% in the early market. Coinbase, the largest, U.S.-based exchange, down about 2.9%. Robinhood down about 1.24%. So a lot of them giving back their gains. All of the Bitcoin mining companies getting hit pretty hard also. So we will keep our eyes on IBIT and the others at open. I will say that the Ethereum ETFs that got approval that will allow for staking of those assets, so they'll actually be yield earning ETFs, they start to trade today. So that could give it a little bit of a push up. We'll see what happens here, though, on that. Earnings week ahead. We do have some key earnings coming up this week. Headlined by that small little company called NVIDIA. Right now trading down about 36 basis points here coming into the day. But they will be on earnings Wednesday. The street is asking, can AI demand stay insatiable? And what is going on with those Chinese H2O chip licensing? What do they have to say about that? It is definitely the event of the week. The street keeps calling AI demand insatiable, but can they keep up with supply, especially with these Chinese tensions still in play? So again, that is going to be the biggest news of the week, in my opinion. We do also see, though, that there are a bunch of earnings coming from the retailer section too. Sorry, I was just looking at Twitter here. Give me 1 second. What was that? Oh, nothing that important. Sorry. But we do see the Gap, Ulta, Kohl's, Abercrombie and Fitch, Williams Sonoma, Best Buy, Dollar Tree, Burlington, and Dick's all reporting this week. My question to you folks is, I do think that there is some lower expectations post Walmart miss, right? Walmart, missed their earnings. Do you think that there is going to be moves to the upside by these retailers, even if they don't have stellar earnings, based upon a lower guideline? As Steve has talked about, some of these have seen, the bar, so to speak, lowered, right? Analysts or expectations have not been all that high. I just pulled up Best Buy here so we can see what the expectations are. They're looking for about $1.21 EPS on 9.23 billion in earnings. Do we at least hit these lowered bars? And is that enough to get, to make the market happy? Those are the two things we want to see here. We also want to see, is consumer resilience holding up, or are we starting to see cracks in the spending story? So far Walmart had decent earnings, but guidance is where they hit there. Hey, Ron, how are you doing, sir? Good to see you this morning. And so far, if you continue to look at earnings, 82% of the S&P names have beaten their earnings so far, but stocks have still wobbled on that guidance, right? That key guidance has been, that what matters. What are they saying about what's going on in the future? The market doesn't seem to care as much about the past, definitely seems to be focused more on the future right now. And what do we hear about earnings momentum? The Fed put Powell just gave us. Does that carry us? What are we going to see today as we start to look at the market here? About 9 minutes before open, advanced decline is down about 765. Again, for those that don't know, advanced decline is the amount of stocks here in the U.S. that are going to open in the green versus the amount that are set to open up in the red. This number in the pre-market isn't the full set because there are a lot of stocks that only trade during cash market hours, starting trading at 9:30 here in about 8 minutes. So this number will move, but negative 700 is a bad start on the day, any way you look at it. And right now, the S&P set to open down slightly around 25 basis points at 643.74. QQQ, which tracks the NASDAQ, is set up to open a little bit worse than that, down about 32 basis points. And we've seen this sort of slide throughout most of the morning. We haven't seen a big appetite yet to buy in. So that's what we'll be watching here through the open. So far overnight, if we look at what's been going on overseas, we do see that the Hong Kong exchange, the Hang Seng, up about 1.94% so far today. And as I mentioned, those returns have rallied the Chinese ADRs, or the U.S. stock exchange versions of these companies. NIO, the car company, up about 15%. Tech and EV leading the way. NetEase was up about 6%. Both of those were up tremendously here in the U.S. As I mentioned, when we looked at the gainers, NetEase is still up about 4.57% here. NIO up about 5.21%. We also see, if we look across the board here, Alibaba up about 2.4%. Baidu up 2.5%. So across the broad spectrum, JD up almost a percentage point here. So we're definitely seeing it across most of the equities there. My question is, is Trump making China great again? Because it seems like tariffs, keep on getting delayed there. And that is helping all of these Chinese companies, doesn't seem to be helping the American companies at all, as we spoke about most of them falling to the wayside here today. So these tariffs don't seem to be helping in the U.S. so far, but they do seem to be helping more overseas. Seen a lot of talk this weekend about risks and risk related to seasonality. We did have July's weaker job data. We know that President Trump fired the labor commissioner, wasn't happy with those numbers. And we are getting to a point in September and October that we are normally see, risk of seasonality. It's usually two of the worst, months of the year. So the question is, of course, what are we going to see here as we bounce back? We did see some folks, Yardeni has come up and sees their base case for year end at the S&P at 6,600. Again, currently at 64.66 here. So, again, they're still looking for more upside in 2026. Yardeni calling for 7,700 to the upside. But we are, again, we see analysts and strategists that warn that September and October historically are tough months, and that we have seen some cracks in the labor market so far. U.S.-Russia tensions are still weighing on the market. The Ukraine war, everything there still definitely puts everything in play. Powell gave us the Fed put. Question is, will it be enough, or will these risks linger and hurt today as we are about 4 minutes from open? I do think NVIDIA earnings will definitely be the rally decider. Everything else to me is just window dressing at this point. Let's be honest. It's all going to come down to what they have to say and what their CEO has to say in general. I do see President is tweeting here this morning. He's on South Korea today. We can't have that. We can't do business there. Seems like there's a purge or a revolution. So there he has come up with quotes on Intel here. He said, I paid zero for Intel. It's worth approximately $11 billion. All goes to the USA. Why are stupid people unhappy with that? I will make deals like that for our country all day long. I will also help those companies that make such lucrative deals with the United States. Okay. I love seeing their stock price go up, making the U.S. richer and richer. More jobs for America. Who wouldn't want to make deals like that? Yeah, it's a tough one for me. I mean, I get that part, but again, that to me is a road down to socialism and communism, and not a road I want to travel. I definitely struggle with that one. We are 2 minutes from the open. What do you guys think? What are we going to see today? Ron, Marilyn, Zora, Faustina. What are we going to see? Ari, what do you think on the cash open? You think we're going to see some? I think profit taking. I do think profit taking is going to come into the market myself here, and I don't know that the buy the dip buyer is there. Thanks, Ron. I appreciate that. I'm going to take a little sip here while I show some of your responses. Thank you, Mr. Flanagan. I think we're going to need it, aren't we? And Marilyn thinks there's profit taking. Ron also. I do think the algos, it's going to be interesting. I'll be watching those Chinese ADRs here on the open. Let's see if they going to hold up, or do they sell off right away? That would give you a little bit of a guide there. Ron, makes sense. I did too. I will tell you, on the pump up on Friday on Palantir, I did actually exit my long-term Palantir, looking to get back into it. But I do think that there is still, on that particular stock, a lot of headwind here right now. So I did take a little bit there. I'd had some really nice profits, and when Jerome gave us the Fed put, I took advantage on some of those. So absolutely. And we always say that. Okay, we are open. Let's see what we have here. First move on the queue is to the upside slightly, 570, 81, 84, 86. So algos, unlike us, are willing to buy this off the open here. The question is are they trying to trick in the market? We saw that in the crypto market. We saw some strong uptake on Saturday, and it was nothing more than an absolute bull trap. And then liquidations really hit, as I said, a lot of it attributed to one trader dumping 24,000 Bitcoin on the market. They're both bouncing up a little bit, but neither able to actually make a move into the positive. The Dow Jones opens up down about 22 basis points here. Tick minus about 276, so more sellers than buyers right now. And that advanced decline popped off down to about negative 2164. We'll say VIX, again, we always warn when VIX is low. 1508 is still low to me. So if you have not bought VIX protection, although up 6% today makes it a hard time to say that. But as you guys know, I do think it's still down. Yeah, I would be buying some VIX protection in here. And you do that, in my opinion, with longer dated calls or a longer dated call spread. Either one tends to work. Gold seeing a nice little spurt up here on the cash open. So we are seeing some buyers of gold. Again, Peter Thomas told us that interest by the central bank still hasn't gone away. Steve Silver nicely above 38.66 here. Bitcoin trying to bounce off the lows of the day, just below 111. Now back at 111,300. Ethereum struggling, had been above 47 earlier, now back at 46.27. So again, we do see some profit taking across crypto, still picking up on the cash open here. Tick is still slightly negative. Let's look at the Mag 7. Microsoft opens up to the upside, everything else to the downside, although Netflix looks like it wants to go positive here, trying. Tesla down about 40 basis points here after the initial trap to the top, it looks like there. Meta down 35 basis points. Amazon made a nice move to the upside, but has sold off, still down about a 0.5 percentage point. NVIDIA, like we said, the $4.35 trillion gorilla in the room. Wow, trading below its daily linear regression here on its chart. And still unable, this is, for me, still a little bearish here. If you can't break above that in 4 days, that's the key zone. It does look a little top heavy then, if that's the case. So NVIDIA is still looking a little weak. And as we mentioned, they go into earnings on Wednesday. Wow, definite sell-off there. Seeing that on the broader market? Yeah, so there you go. You guys nailed it. Quasar Markets crew, you guys nailed it. There you go to the downside. So let's take a look at the early gainers. See profit taken coming across Netgear. Tiger's holding up a little bit better there. What about Baidu? Baidu, again, profit taking there. Okta, some pretty big profit taking, was up over 3%. This is one of the few that wasn't, or the only one that really wasn't a Chinese name getting in the mix. Any of these laggards seeing any big movement to the upside? Pony AI still selling off here. The Ethereum treasury company, SBET, and again, we pointed out the crypto companies definitely under pressure here to start the day across the board. Galaxy Digital down about 5.55%. I did see over the weekend or this morning, Galaxy Digital, Jump Capital, and I forget who the third major crypto VC company starting their own Solana treasury company in hopes of going public. So again, even with the market in a downturn right now, a little bit of bearishness there, we do see more venture capital still trying to get into the crypto market. Tick is calming down a little bit, negative 150, so that's where we're keeping my eyes right now. If we look across the sectors of the S&P, we see that real estate holdings up slightly, up about 9 basis points, and we do see industrials now flat on the day. And again, no sectors really, 1% up or 1% down. In fact, none of them are even a half a percentage point yet. So we are seeing more standoffishness, but just not a scene of apathy, I think I would say. And what I like maybe is maybe some cautiousness for retail traders. Nothing wrong with that, as you guys mentioned, and gals, sitting on the sidelines and see what you get here this morning before you really make a decision one way or the other is never a bad idea. We do see the Qs trying to break back above VWAP on the shorter term chart here. Yeah, Ron, thinking it may tick up from here. It's trying. First gauge would be, for me, can it break through VWAP on the lower time frame? And then you just look for me pretty simply, the high on Friday was that 574. When it comes to the Qs, can it break 574? So that's what I'm really looking at here. If you do, I do think you then you do see that buyer is stepping back in here in a real way. And now the VIX under 15. So now it starts to get interesting. Really interesting to me at 1448 is where I'm looking there. Bitcoin not having as much luck, still at that 111, low 111 range. It doesn't want to stay there too long, or you have risks of more risk to the downside. Ethereum, same thing. First attempt to break through the VWAP here on the lower time frame was rejected. Qs are trying to break through it. That would give them a little bit more strength than other things here. And let's see if the MAG start. And that's usually what happens when we see all of the MAG 7 open up in the red. You tend to see some of them drift back up into the positive state and take the Qs with them. That's what we're seeing so far. Not seeing a huge volume spike. It seems like this is all happening on fairly muted volume here. RUT is now down about 32 basis points here. Gold back below the VWAP. So everything that may try to make that first move through VWAP seems to be struggling right around there, although the Qs do look like they want to take off a little bit here. You see Constellation Energy up about 1% here this morning. Nice little move since the cash opened there. Nice little move to the upside. CrowdStrike up a little bit here today, although a little bit more. They do have earnings coming up on Wednesday also. So another big company with earnings. Delta Airline down about 1.18%. I thought I saw too. American was getting hit earlier today. Yeah, down about 1.77%. Coinbase now down 3.1%. So again, the crypto stocks getting hit pretty hard this morning. Advanced decline actually moving still in the negative direction, down about 2445. So about 2,500 more companies are currently trading in the red today versus the green here in the US. Just trying to take a look at my Twitter here to see if anything is clicking. And we do see a little bit of a rejection at the VWAP here. You got it, Ron. I mean, in general, if you're asking me about Pepsi from a bigger fundamental part, I am not a huge fan. While I am a big fan of Diet Pepsi myself, consumers' patterns have, continued to go to less and less sugary drinks there. From a standing on the charts, I would more be looking to buy the dip at this 143 area, Ron, than necessarily looking to buy at current level. I do think from a strictly sort of analytics or analyst look, I think you're probably going to come back and challenge this liquidity zone in here. Yeah, fundamentally, I think all of them are under pressure, Ron. When it comes to it, that health trend, I don't think is going to stop. And there's just so much competition in that category that does it. So, yep, absolutely. Dixie at 97.88 here. So off of the lows of the morning. Again, Friday, it took the big drop to the downside here. So we're going to have to ask Mr. Flanagan when he comes in what he thinks here. Are we headed back up? Can we get back towards that 98.70 range that we, were at? I do know he talks a lot about weekly closes here. It gives us a pretty low bar, I think, the weekly close, Mr. Flanagan. So I might push you on that one today. Weekly close to me would be, that better be in the works, right? I guess. So that's what we'll find out from him as soon as he's ready to go here this morning. 1482 on the VIX, like I said, starting to get really nicely down towards that 14 area. Something I'll be looking at here after we get off the show and throughout today. You just want to take a look here at my positions, what's going on. Not a heck of a lot. Not a heck of a lot. I got an OTA position that's doing pretty good today. That's about it. That is all I have. It's continuing to come down. I'd like it to fill this gap down. Fill the gap would be about 1462. So if you can get in that range, I do think it's a good spot to start to look. I could tell you personally, if I look at it here pretty quickly, I'd start to be looking out for something towards maybe September 24th. I mean, what's going on here? There we go. You could buy the 15, sell the 20 for about 223 there. But definitely would be looking at the VIX myself. We'll be looking at the VIX. Here we go, Bitcoin below 111. So now you are getting right to it. That level I talked about that I had on my chart here for a while at 110,650 triggered a wish list buy over the weekend. I've now reset the wish list buy for 107,582. And I do think any drop here below this 110,500 area, you will see the next wave of liquidations as traders still remain. What we've seen is these buy the dip crypto hits definitely hitting the market. Q's now selling off again, so we are getting back down towards the lows of the day. Lows of the day are 569.17. You drop. It does look like we are headed back to 566.45 on the Q's here. That would be my zone that I'm looking at here. You broke structure. No more support really till you get to that area. Got a small amount of support at 568.17 that could save you. But again, any drop here, you're looking more at that 566 area. And on a daily chart, you can see that it's challenged on two different occasions. The 50-day MA back at 557.86. So that would be the area, the ultimate area of support to watch for here. If we do see more of a slide today, SPY holding up a little bit better here, trying to hold VWAP on the short-term chart. And it does have a little bit more support under it, as you can see here, both from price action along with the 200 moving average on the hourly chart gives it a little bit more support. And it's got a second level of price action support right around that 642 area. So you do get a little bit more support there. We do see now Netflix nicely going up here about 1.3%. The big news on Netflix, I meant to mention that in the pre-market, is that they are going heavy after global soccer, they announced. So they are going to be going heavily after the global soccer contracts, World Cup, Spanish League, Premier League, all those things. So it looks like people liking that news. Not a big mover maybe here in the U.S., but we know around the world definitely is up about 1.34% on that news. Google has gone positive, also up about a 0.5 percentage point here so far. Mr. Flanagan, you can always come in early, my friend. You are always welcome in. You know that. Apple up about a 0.25 percentage point. They have also announced that I believe it's September 7th is going to be their, well, I should go through that right here. This is today's, yeah. Apple is announcing that they are going to, this is, I see Mr. Flanagan's here. Let's get him in. Mr. Flanagan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Howard. Hope everybody's had a great weekend.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's get into it. DXY, that weekly close, not really a heck of a target, is it?
Well, we closed 97.73. We're just, kind of hovering above it. The charting pattern has Friday has, put a lot of the charting and technicals in a kind of question mark right now. But as long as we hold this level, I still have higher lows in the chart. So,
right.
But I'm looking at Friday, and I'm going to say, let me just base my decisions in trading now. I'm still a buyer on the dips, but I'm going to use the high and low from Friday. So what do we have? We have 97.56 as the low and 98.83 as the high. Now, 98.83.
What was the high again? I'm sorry.
98.83. So I'm going to use those two levels as a directional signal to me. I am still buying the dip. and I will continue to buy the dip provided I hold 97.56. And then if I go to my chart pattern of higher lows, it's imperative to hold 97.11, which was the July 24th low.
I'm with you. It's funny. It's we never say this. I almost have the same exact feeling about Bitcoin right now. It's
Yes.
holding that 110, but by a thin thread, in my personal opinion. And I'm a buyer at 110, but if it loses it, it's going to 107. Got to have a close stop loss ready for yourself.
And exactly in the Dixie, and exactly in a number of markets. So let's back up and look at, if I'm going to pivot from a Friday high low and the close, and that's exceptional when we see these type of technical formations.
Right.
I'm going to back up and say, I love music, and I love, in my 43 plus years, I would come into a trading room with my headphones on. Yep, even back in the early days. And I would love to play music. So what comes to mind today is this is funny, because 56 years ago, on August 17th, 1969, we had Woodstock. And what started off Woodstock was Jefferson Airplane, Gracie Slick, when she said, "It's a new dawn." And
Right.
you watch the government stepping into Intel. It's a new dawn. We're looking at an entirely different world. So, what was Friday? Jackson Hole. Okay, these are not little points. When the Fed pivots, this is something you immediately wake up, get yourself in the driver's seat, because things are going to change. So we've gone from inflation to growth. This is the Fed has those two pedals, and
Right.
they're off the inflation, which in the bigger picture is going to be gold, silver, and Bitcoin higher. Okay, let the market digest. And that's what we're seeing today. It's also going to mean growth. And growth, you couldn't ask for a better recipe into the equity market space, and in my case, the currencies. When people begin to cut rates, as we saw in Europe, the euro appreciated. Now, the prevailing logic is, when you cut rates, the currency declines. And almost every headline is talking about further dollar declines. Now, remember, the dollar is down in the first half of the year. It has never dropped this much since the 1970s.
Right. Down almost 10%, 9.83%.
Right. So here you are with everybody saying dollar lower at a point in time where you haven't had a move in the first half of the year like this in over 50 years. So I don't like to jump into that pool and add to a dollar short. Okay. So then let's take the other. It wasn't just Jay Powell at Jackson Hole. You had ECB Lagarde, who came out and she said, I'm going to read from my notes here, that we should be cautious. Now, listen to these words. In assuming that this is a unique constellation of forces that they will last. What the heck is that? A constellation of force. Now, Europe is down to 2%, and we've had the German GDP come out negative. And this coming week, on Thursday, Friday, we've got Italian and French GDP, and a host of nations putting out their inflation. So if this constellation of growth in Europe is lower, look out, the dollar is going to roar. But let's go further. You had the Bank of Japan, UEDA, come out at Jackson Hole. Wages are rising and labor shortages have become one of the most pressing economic issues in Japan. Well, let's go basic economics 101. If we look at a wage shortage, that's higher wages, which Japan wants of inflation, but that also triggers a series of inflation in Japan, Remember, they've been fighting deflation for over 25 years. So you've got two central banks now that come out and really put a constellation. Okay, I've never heard that one in central bank jargon. And
It is a
BOJ
new one. It
coming
is a
out.
new one. They
Yeah,
always get good
BOJ
ones,
coming out.
though. Irrational exuberation still might. I mean, we've had all kinds of good ones over the years.
But let's finish this one up with Bank of England, Bailey coming out again at Jackson Hole. UK faces an acute challenge. Now, we all know acute. Acute is not a good word, especially in a central banker. Over the weak underlying economic growth and reduced labor force participation since COVID-19. They need a major increase in productivity. Okay, why do I go to the lengths to say this? You've got the other members of the industrialized world all talking about constellation, acute, and serious labor shortages. Against that backdrop, you have the Fed pivoting from inflation to growth. This is an incredible positive. And what this is going to be, and I'm not looking at today's trading, I'm looking at, I like macro. That's what you learn when you trade FX. The US is now opened the top and is now going to be the magnet of growth, especially when we talk about AI and all the the government move into Intel. Okay, so Intel, we're all questioning. Every news wire's got, this is not what United States is all about. I heard you talk about Ronald Reagan, and yeah, but this is the way the world works today. Europe is a quagmire of industry.
Well, I said, I mean, but we've normally railed against that, Airbus and all these things. It's going to take a while to understand, it is. And the question is, does it make it more than through this administration? You know what I mean? That's the other question. Is this actually a structural change, or is this just a blip on the radar?
Okay, valid points. Absolutely. Does it? I don't know. And
it's so far out of the box of what we're used to seeing and how quickly it evolved. That's what I mean. It's just I don't think anyone can predict it. What is going to come of this. I think it's good for revenue for the U.S. I mean that I don't think there's any question. Getting 10% for, and it's not for free, because we did give them. The one thing I will point out is we did give them the money. Okay,
that's right.
So it wasn't for free. So that's a misnomer. But again, if you think it's a good one, my question would be, is 10% of Intel better than 10% of NVIDIA? Do we go after the right company? Are we going to go after them all? That would be part of the questions there from it.
Well, 2 points to you. One, we've got 3+ years of this administration. So that's a very long time in which these gears to start kicking in. And two,
well, so what I don't know, though, is where does Congress, who gets to make decisions on this? In other words, the president has sometimes made decisions that then have to be reviewed by other people or other agencies. And, that might flip in 2 years, very, very quickly.
Okay, that's another.
This is so far out. Like I said, there wasn't enough time to do enough research to know the stuff. And, and again, I hope it's a positive, for it. It isn't something that's not done in other countries. It absolutely is. And it works over there. So it could work here. Like I said, I'm not being a naysayer. I just don't, I can't digest it all yet.
That's where I'm trying to add some light to the discussion here. So, you've got all of this in the making now, and the United States could be, I mean, if you look at select industries, you have Taiwan Semiconductors that everybody buys from, right? What do they have? Some massive percent. But now you've got a situation that in several years, Intel could become a major player against TSM, and that would be an incredible positive. Now, I'm just using these. I'm getting a little off of me, but for the viewers, that lays a macro environment for the United States becoming a magnet for capital. Okay, you've got India that's right now fighting the United States tooth and nail. Well, guess what? India will be left behind. You've got Brazil and you've got China and Russia. China is not going to be left behind because they're working very closely with the United States. And I think you'll see some very good things down the road. But when you talk about the BRICS nation trying to hustle and hold together here, what's going to happen is economically, these countries will be left behind. Now, the key here is they have massive populations. And this is not something they can afford from an investment point of view. And that's the way I look at this. Each country is its own, well, I used to say, but I don't like to talk about gambling casinos, but each country is a casino. And in that casino, you need the chips to play. And the chips come through foreign exchange. You need dollars, you exchange your yen and you get dollars. You exchange your euro, and then once you're in the dollar, then you can play real estate, money markets, bonds, you can play equities, you can do any of these particular tables that are available in that country. The United States, by setting this stage in a macro view, becomes the magnet for where all money is going to look to invest. That taken with a world that every headline is saying you want to increase your dollar hedging, being short dollars, against the backdrop since April where the dollar has declined and has not had a first half move in over 50 years to this degree. The recipe to me is we are at the lows. And that's why I keep, coming on. The chart formation is supporting me. I'm giving you specific levels. There could be a substantial upside move that lasts. These levels we look at today could be levels that we will not see in the next 3 to 5 years. So from that point of view, that's how I make my forecast in a macro view.
Absolutely. And you heard it from him. That is definitely the case, that I feel the same way on Bitcoin. You're not going to get these prices in 3 years for sure. That one's a little bit different, but that's exactly the same, and it is setting up to that style. We'll get BigBeat. I know he had a doctor's appointment this morning. He was going to be back because I do wonder, where's his views. I did see Michael Litt just sent a note to me. He's definitely not buying the dip. So, he's calling it a bump up for the back to school electronic spending, behavioral bump. But again, he is a perma beer. So that, that's going to be his view, right? In general is always going to be on the negative there. But it is interesting to see what everybody has to say on both sides.
Michael Litt has a great window and view. And, I respect his view. He is very sharp and he presents, a very good argument for that case. However, I'll go back to how I started your show off today. It's a new dawn. And that is the way I look at the world today, especially from a U.S. point of view. This is all new. And will it work? I believe it will. It's done everywhere else in the world. And I always react when the Fed pivots. To me, I get in the driver's seat and get ready to really start driving hard, because when things begin to change from a Fed pivot, they typically have quite a bit of life to them.
Sure. And I agree with that myself. Yeah. I guess the overarching question is, will the stock market go back to, and what it is will Wall Street and Main Street disconnect again a little bit, is what I guess I would say, because that's what it sort of is where sometimes where stocks can just keep on going up. Well, maybe the economy isn't as strong at all points of it. It doesn't have to be, right? It just has to be where the investors find more alpha, where they think it's a better spot to park their money than other places. And you've pointed out a compelling point after point after point on where other countries are currently and where they're headed. And, there isn't, I don't think anyone can, reasonably argue that they're better off, the other countries are better off than we are.
Right. When you have the three central bankers I mentioned all coming out with wishy-washy and actually pointing out serious problems, the UK growth, Japan wage growth is there is a wage growth shortage in their market, for people. These are serious questions or serious hurdles that the central bankers are pointing out. And in the euro with Lagarde talking about a constellation of things, I don't really think that they have a very good grip. There's 20 plus member nations. The thing is that Europe is embracing the United States.
Absolutely.
That trade accord and the signing really turned me around. I did not see that one coming. So Europe is clinging to the U.S. You talk about crypto. Well, crypto is really a U.S. centric leadership now. So yes, I agree with you. That if my scenario plays out, crypto will go right along with the U.S. and you could see Bitcoin. I don't know. Pick a level. 100, 300, 500, a million. It could go anywhere based on the adoption of that. And I do believe that's a whole different subject, and you and I have touched on it, that currencies in crypto will eventually begin to fold into one another in some ways.
Absolutely, especially in the way of use of blockchain technology for trading, because of how, it's so computer driven. Absolutely, I agree. Mr. Flanagan, thank you so much, like always, bringing that macro look to us. We appreciate it so much. For Quasar Markets, everybody, be nimble out there today. There's still profit taking going on. Qs have picked up nicely, though. SPYs are starting to pick up. So we are seeing the buy the dip buyer come in. We'll see where we end up. Mr. Flanagan, what do you think we end up today, up or down?
I think that we're probably now until NVIDIA in a sideways trading pattern. So sell, rally, buy, dip, but I'm a better buyer of the dip. And I think NVIDIA, could just open up this whole new dawn, as we say.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that is where the fireworks will come. So we'll have our popcorn ready for Wednesday. We'll ask you before. It doesn't happen until after hours on Wednesday. So we'll get your final views on NVIDIA on Wednesday and what could shake from there. So thank you from Quasar Markets, everybody. Have a great